President Bola Tinubu is calling for debt forgiveness for developing countries and measures to recover proceeds of corruption and illicit financial flows from such countries. Speaking at the ongoing 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly, Tinubu emphasized the importance of inclusivity, equality, and cooperation in addressing global challenges such as terrorism, climate change, poverty, and food crisis. The president, who was represented by Vice President Kashim Shettima, also urged world leaders to strengthen multilateralism through deeper cooperation among United Nations member states. President Tinubu decried the rise of singularity and nationalism, which he believes undermines collective efforts to resolve global issues. He reaffirmed Nigeria's commitment to multilateralism and expressed concerns about the UN's ability to sustain its relevance and resilience.
Process of corruption and illicit financial flows constitute a huge chunk of resources needed for sustainable development. The recovery and return of such funds to states of origin is a fundamental principle of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. Therefore, the international community must promote practical measures to strengthen international cooperation to recover and return stolen assets and to eradicate safe havens that facilitate illicit flows of funds from developing countries to the developed economies. There is also the urgent need to promote fair and inclusive tax regimes in the world. Nigeria helped introduce the resolution on promotion of inclusive and effective international tax cooperation at the UN. We acknowledge the progress made in the adoption of the terms of reference of the UN Framework Convention on Tax Cooperation. We should deepen this initiative and work towards a UN Framework Convention on Tax Cooperation. Similarly, we must ensure that any reform of the international financial system includes comprehensive debt relief measures to enable sustainable financing for development. Countries of the Global South cannot make meaningful economic progress without special concessions and a review of their current debt burden. The present administration pays due regard to the imperatives of creating a conducive national environment for investment and the ease of doing business. Last year, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu signed 4 executive orders to curb double taxation. The government also established the Presidential Task Force on review of fiscal policy and tax reform. These measures are geared towards not only boosting investor confidence in Nigeria, but also to ensure investors make reasonable profit from their investments.
And our Arise News correspondent, Adesua Giwa-Asage, is covering the United Nations General Assembly in New York live and now brings us updates of proceedings at the event. It's good to have you with us here on Newsday, Adesua. Thank you so much for joining us. Could you give us a brief recap of what our Vice President had to say in his speech?
It's so lovely to see Hawa and Tim talk. We're out here in very cold New York. We're right in front of the UN headquarters. And Vice President Shettima did speak around 9 p.m. last night on Nigeria, but also on Africa. And I think it's very important that he emphasized the need. One of the highlights for me was the need for Africa to have a permanent seat on the Security Council. Now, the Security Council is going to have meetings today. And as you spoke earlier, even in your headlines, we're having insecurity issues in the eastern region, in Eastern Africa. We have heightened issues in the Middle East with Hezbollah and Israel. So there's conflict across the world, and it's very important that Africa has a say, and not just on a rotational basis, but a permanent seat. And the African countries, I would say, that are in the running to hold this permanent seat on the council include Nigeria, South Africa, Ghana, and some of the North African countries. And so it's very important for Vice President Shettima to have stressed that. The speech obviously was originally supposed to be given by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, but it's very important for Nigeria to come out and reclaim its place really as an international leader. Now, beyond talking about insecurity and security issues that are plaguing the world, he also spoke about climate change and energy efficiency, and in the global, and he also described the differences between the global north and the global south and how those gaps are actually widening. Now, the global north is currently talking about energy transition, moving moving to clean energy, but they already have access to electricity, they already have access to energy, while in the global south we have energy poverty. We have people who live without electricity and have to deal with those problems. So those are two main things he highlighted. But he also talked about terrorism, funding for terrorism, and the need to go again, the need to control the new technologies such as AI, and that can help fund terrorism in countries like Nigeria, help fund our insecurity issues. So I would say those are the highlights of the speech.
Well, so what can we expect, from today's outing at the UN General Assembly?
Well, today is mostly focused on security. We have Security Council meetings and we have meetings on the sidelines. As I said earlier, we have the issues with Israel and Hezbollah, the Middle East, the Gaza crisis. You have the Ukraine-Russia war. Zelensky is here in New York. We now have heightened tensions in Eastern Africa with Somalia. So security is going to be the conversation of the day in New York.
And Adesua, we know you've been speaking to a few of our Nigerian governors who are present. What could you tell us about some of the conversations that have been happening?
Yeah, so there are a few governors here in New York. I was lucky enough to have an interview with the governor of Nasarawa State, His Excellency Engineer Sule, as well as the governor of Niger State, His Excellency Umar Bago. Now, they talked about the specific issues they're facing, and also about SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. Number one, eradicating poverty. We have a large number of Nigerians living in poverty, mostly in northern Nigeria. And you also have them dealing with specific issues. In Niger State, there was a lot of flooding. Climate change is an issue. And the global north contributes the most to climate change, but the global south suffers the most. And so when you have hundreds of people losing their livelihoods and their homes in Niger State, in Adamawa State in northern Nigeria, and you have the global north here kind of immune from those extreme instances, you need advocacy in environments such as the UN. We also had them speak about minerals and agriculture. So particularly, His Excellency Bago spoke about agriculture in Niger State, trying to make Niger State the food basket of Nigeria. We also had the governor of Nasarawa State talk about minerals. The essential minerals such as lithium are very prevalent in Niger State, and so we have a lot of international interest in Nigeria right now, and we need to make sure that our interests are protected by our executives, the governors, but as well as the federal government. So the governors are here working on the sidelines to try and get investments into their states, try to improve improve the numbers when it comes to the SDGs, eradicating poverty, improving healthcare, improving education. But a huge thing that is the conversation, particularly yesterday, I was also lucky enough to see the president of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, speak, and there's a conversation around dignity, African dignity, development with dignity, coming to the table as an equal and not on a lower level. So I think it's a time where it's an African rising, and I think that's also what we're going to see today on the sidelines. The Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, is having her Unstoppable Africa event today and tomorrow, and it's going to be an amazing time for Africans to bring themselves to the forefront.
Well, of course, I was hoping that you would tell us a bit more about events taking place on the sidelines today. Would you like to talk a bit more about that?
Yes, so what we have today, one of the biggest events is Unstoppable Africa. And we're expecting to see Aliko Dangote there. We're expecting to see the former Vice President of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, speak for the event tomorrow. But it's all under Unstoppable Africa, and it's talking about soft power, soft diplomacy, increasing our creative economies, and also increasing investment into Africa on a more level playing field. The global south and Africa seem to always come second in the conversation. However, we have events on the sidelines that focus on our independent needs as Nigerians and independent needs as Africans, and also cross-collaboration amongst African countries. The president of Liberia is here, the president of Namibia is here, as well as the president of Ghana. And when they attend these events, the conversation is, how does Africa uplift itself together amongst ourselves? How do we work amongst ourselves to make sure that our place on the global stage is more secure, and to also protect our interests when the West or the Middle East has their own crises that actually affects us and our daily lives, our economies, our security. And so that is what I would say the highlights of what's going on the sidelines of UNGA today are, particularly when it comes to Nigeria and Africa.
And were there any other flashpoints that were impressive to you over the course of the UNGA that you have witnessed?
Yes. I mean, last night was an incredible night. We had the Ministry of Creative Economy have an event out here called Destination Nigeria 2030. They were highlighting FESTEC 77 and also highlighting Nigeria's role on the international stage. You know, it's a very beautiful time to come and be reminded of Nigeria's role in the struggles in Angola, in South Africa, and how we have played a bigger role in the past, even in ECOMOG, and in making sure that Africa is safe. We were the big brother of Africa, and it seems that the Nigerian delegation is trying to reclaim that title as the big brother of Africa for Nigeria. But beyond that also, I think one of the most impressive things is the focus on energy and focus on innovation around energy. Without Africa moving forward, the world can't move forward, and there's a stress on that. The Mission 300, which is the World Bank and African Development Bank initiative, is also trying to get more Africans connected to electricity, connected to the grid, reducing the numbers of energy poverty, because if you're energy poor, your health will be reduced, you have limited access to education, limited access to proper health care, it hinders entrepreneurship, and so these are the highlights I would say so far.
Arise international correspondent Adesua Giwa Osage, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.